What just unfolded inside Windsor Castle has royal insiders completely shaken. After 25 years of silence, whispers, and buried tension, Prince William finally made a move nobody expected. Driven by years of bottled-up anger and heartbreak, he reportedly pulled Princess Diana's official portrait out of a forgotten storage room deep inside the palace and placed it exactly where many believe it always belonged, right beside Queen Elizabeth on the legendary Hall of Matriarchs wall. Camilla reportedly never saw this coming. The second she laid eyes on Diana's portrait hanging there, the atmosphere inside the palace allegedly turned ice cold. Sources claim she rushed straight to King Charles, demanding the portrait be taken down immediately. But what happened next stunned everyone inside the royal household and triggered a wave of tension the palace can no longer hide. This wasn't just a painting. It was a wound that never truly healed. Most people have never even seen this portrait of Princess Diana up close, and the truth about where it's been hidden for the last 25 years feels almost unbelievable. The painting was created during the peak of Diana's global fame, at a time when she had become more than just a royal figure. She was admired everywhere for her warmth, her compassion, and the rare way she made ordinary people feel important and understood. People who witnessed Diana seeing the finished portrait for the very first time say the room went completely silent. She reportedly stood there staring at it without saying a word, almost like the painting captured a side of her the world rarely got to see. The portrait was originally meant to hang inside Windsor Castle's Hall of Matriarchs, one of the most respected and symbolic spaces in the royal residence, reserved for women who shaped the monarchy's history. But Diana never got the chance to see it there. After her tragic death, the portrait was quietly removed from consideration, wrapped away, and hidden in palace storage for more than 2 decades. Completely out of sight. When Princess Diana died in August 1997, the entire world exploded with grief. Crowds filled the streets, flowers covered palace gates, and millions mourned a woman they felt truly connected to. But behind the massive palace walls, a very different scene was unfolding. One far colder and far more unsettling. According to royal insiders, while the public was still trying to process the shocking news, urgent conversations inside the palace reportedly focused on something else entirely. One of the first concerns raised was whether Diana still had any crown jewelry with her in Paris. Before the country had even fully learned their princess was gone, discussions about recovering royal property had already begun. And while that chaos quietly unfolded behind closed doors, Camilla was allegedly already making moves of her own. For years, she had existed in the shadows of Diana's marriage to Charles, the woman linked to one of the most painful chapters in Diana's life. Diana herself privately referred to Camilla as the Rottweiler, a nickname that revealed just how deeply she felt betrayed and cornered inside her own marriage. Now Diana was gone, and the atmosphere inside the palace reportedly began changing fast. Sources claim Camilla slowly started taking control of spaces Diana once filled with warmth and personality. Diana had famously kept fresh flowers throughout the rooms she used, carefully choosing arrangements that brought life into the palace. But according to reports, those flowers were not simply removed after her death. They were destroyed completely, burned instead of replaced, as if every trace of Diana needed to disappear. Then came the room Diana once slept in, the deeply private space where she spent time with William and Harry, where she cried during the darkest moments of her marriage, and where she wrote personal thoughts away from the public eye. Reports claim Camilla ordered the room permanently locked, not reopened, not redesigned, sealed away completely, almost like a chapter the palace wanted hidden forever. Diana's belongings were boxed up and moved out quietly. Her image slowly vanished from major ceremonial areas inside royal residences. And perhaps most shocking of all, her portrait never made it onto Windsor Castle's Hall of Matriarchs wall. For more than 20 years, one of the most loved royal women in modern history was missing from her own family's wall of honor. And palace insiders say the tension behind that decision never truly disappeared. William was only 15 years old when he walked behind Princess Diana's coffin through the streets of London, a child in a dark suit stepping forward in silence while the world watched in stunned disbelief. No tears in public, no breakdowns caught on camera. just a young boy forced to carry unimaginable weight in front of millions, his expression locked in place as history unfolded around him. At that age, William already knew the cracks inside his parents' marriage were not rumors. Diana had spoken to him directly. She told him there were 3 people in the marriage, a phrase that stayed with him long after the moment passed. It was her way of explaining a situation that had already torn the family apart from the inside. Harry, his younger brother, discovered pieces of the truth in a different, unexpected way. While watching a television discussion about the monarchy with Diana, Camilla's name appeared on screen. Harry, confused, turned to his mother and asked who she was. In that moment, Diana was forced to explain something deeply personal to her youngest son without warning, without preparation, right there in real time. But one of the most disturbing claims tied to Diana's final years comes from a private letter written in 1995, just 2 years before her death. In it, addressed to her solicitor, Lord Mishcon, Diana reportedly expressed fear that her life was in danger. She wrote that she believed Prince Charles was planning an orchestrated car crash involving brake failure and severe injury to clear the path for his future. She also described Camilla as a decoy, claiming she was being used within a much larger emotional and political situation. 2 years after that letter was written, Diana died in a car crash inside a Paris tunnel. The document was later handed to authorities, but reportedly remained unexamined for years before eventually reaching Scotland Yard. Charles was later questioned privately at St. James's Palace about the claims. William and Harry did not learn the full contents of that letter for years afterward. And when William finally came to understand what his mother had written in the final stretch of her life, and then compared it to how her memory was handled inside the palace after her death, something in him reportedly changed permanently. It never really softened after that. William reportedly carried a silence in public, but behind closed doors, it was a very different story. He watched Camilla move through the same rooms where Princess Diana once lived with warmth and life. He noticed portraits of his mother being taken down, removed piece by piece, as if her presence needed to be quietly erased from history. And then there was the Hall of Matriarchs, the place where Diana should have been honored, left empty in her absence. Outwardly, William stayed composed. He learned how to keep his face calm, how to stand still in front of cameras, how to give nothing away. But inside, according to close accounts, the anger and grief were building into something heavy and unrelenting. At just 16 years old, he finally confided in someone he trusted. In a moment of raw emotion, he reportedly said that Camilla had got her claws into his father and never let go. He believed this was a central reason his mother suffered the way she did. Pushed away, isolated, and left vulnerable without the protection she once had. He described Diana as being cut off from support, left exposed, and ultimately alone during the final chapter of her life in Paris. Those words, spoken by a teenager, reportedly stayed with him for decades. But William was not the only one carrying deep resentment tied to Camilla. Princess Anne's history with her goes back even further, long before Diana entered the royal picture. Before Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles, Andrew was in a serious relationship with Princess Anne. They were close enough that marriage was openly discussed. However, the royal institution intervened, and the relationship was effectively stopped. Andrew was Catholic, and Anne, as a senior royal tied to the Church of England, was not able to proceed with marriage under those expectations. Anne stepped aside. There was no alternative for her at the time. Not long after, Camilla entered the picture, and Andrew eventually married her instead. Anne was present at their 1973 wedding, watching it unfold from the pews. The woman who married the man Anne once loved would later become deeply tied to the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage, remain a constant shadow through years of royal turmoil, and ultimately take a place at the very heart of the monarchy itself. Royal author Penny Junor has reportedly claimed that Camilla felt deeply intimidated by Princess Anne for years. According to those accounts, Anne's cold, distant energy toward her never really softened. And the tension from their shared history was something that was never resolved, and never seemed like it ever would be. After the 2023 coronation, things allegedly got even sharper. At a private luncheon, Anne reportedly confronted Camilla directly, locking eyes with her in a way that changed the entire atmosphere of the room. She then said the words straight to her face. "You are not the queen. You are just the king's wife." Anne has allegedly never bowed to Camilla at any point, and sources claim she even asked Queen Elizabeth personally for permission to be exempt from that protocol, a request that was reportedly granted. From that moment on, Anne's stance never shifted. She watched Diana's presence slowly fade from royal spaces. She saw the portrait disappear into silence. She saw the Hall of Matriarchs remain empty for 2 decades, and she carried all of it without ever speaking loudly about it. Both Anne and William reportedly wanted the same thing deep down: to bring Diana back to where she belonged, the Hall of Matriarchs. Then came the night everything finally started moving. William had been preparing in silence for years, setting things up piece by piece like a long game no one else could see. He held careful meetings with curators about portrait placement rules and studied historical records going back decades, making sure he understood every detail. He reportedly made certain that every institutional rule was followed exactly, so that when the moment arrived, nothing could be blocked, delayed, or undone. It was like a 20-year chess match happening inside the family itself. And this was the final play. The night before it all unfolded, William called Anne. The call didn't last long. Both already understood what was coming, like they'd been waiting for the same moment in silence for years. "I cannot wait to see the look on her face. It is long overdue. Diana deserves to come home," Anne said. "She comes home tomorrow," William responded. Then the line went quiet. Camilla had no idea that move had already been set in motion. She had no idea what was coming for her the next morning. For 25 years, Camilla had reportedly carried herself like everything had already been decided, like the past had been settled in her favor. But inside Windsor Castle, something irreversible was already in motion, and she was about to find out just how wrong that belief was. The night everything changed, William's team had deliberately arranged for Camilla to be outside London on an official engagement. It wasn't random. According to insiders, it was carefully timed to remove her from the palace entirely, keeping her away until what was about to happen could no longer be stopped or undone. While she was gone, the Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor was shut down to everyone except a very small group of trusted staff. Every person involved had been personally vetted. Each one understood they were part of something highly sensitive, something that had been building for years in silence. No announcement appeared on the royal diary. No press statement was drafted. Nothing was made public. It was all happening behind closed doors, completely out of sight. As evening settled in, Princess Diana's portrait was finally carried into the Hall of Matriarchs. It had been locked away in palace storage for over 20 years, carefully wrapped and untouched. Staff members reportedly handled it with extreme care, almost reverently, as if they were bringing something back that had been wrongfully forgotten. Princess Anne was there in person. She had insisted on overseeing the installation herself, refusing to leave it in anyone else's hands. According to accounts, she had waited too long for this moment to trust it to anyone else. The protective covering was slowly removed, and for the first time in more than 2 decades, Diana's face was visible again inside Windsor Castle, standing within the very space that had once been denied to her. The frame had already been prepared. Measurements had been double-checked and confirmed. And within just 90 minutes of the portrait arriving in the gallery, Diana was finally on the wall where she was always meant to be. Positioned directly beside Queen Elizabeth. 2 women, one who ruled for 70 years, and one who never had the chance to rule at all. Right where they should have been together from the very beginning. The moment the installation was complete, the entire room reportedly fell into an unsettling silence. Multiple witnesses described it the same way. Nobody spoke, nobody moved, just a heavy stillness as everyone stared at what had just been done. It was like time itself paused for a few seconds inside the Hall of Matriarchs. Then, Princess Anne, who had entered that room carrying decades of grief, anger, and deeply personal history tied to everything that had unfolded over the years, finally broke the silence. According to staff nearby, she spoke quietly, almost under her breath, but the words landed heavily in the room. "Pointless," she said, and then added, "Diana belongs here. I object. She always did." Just a blunt truth spoken in a space that had stayed silent about it for more than 25 years. Diana, during her lifetime, had become one of the most recognizable and adored royal figures in modern history. She filled stadiums, drew crowds into the streets, and her funeral became a global moment of grief unlike anything seen before or since. And yet, despite all of that public love, her own family had kept her portrait locked away in storage for over 2 decades, hidden from the very walls she was meant to be part of. All of this, according to insiders, happened because her presence was seen as disruptive by one person in particular. That same night, while the portrait was being placed, Camilla was reportedly asleep in London, completely unaware of what had just taken place inside Windsor Castle. She had no idea the wall had changed. No idea history had just been rewritten in silence. There is also another layer that adds weight to this story: the fear Camilla allegedly felt when first meeting William as an adult. Royal biographer Christopher Anderson reported that during their early face-to-face interaction at Clarence House, she appeared visibly shaken and reportedly needed a drink beforehand just to steady herself before entering the room. Critics interpret that moment as something deeper than nerves. They believe it reflected an awareness of everything tied to Diana's legacy and everything William had grown up carrying. She was facing not just a young man, but the son of the woman at the center of one of the most painful royal chapters in modern history. Camilla had reportedly feared William since he was a teenager. But what she never anticipated was how far that silence would go. Or that the boy who once walked behind his mother's coffin would one day spend decades quietly preparing a moment like this one. A moment where Diana would be brought back into the place she was always meant to occupy. That evening, Camilla reportedly returned from her engagement outside London, completely unaware of what had just changed inside Windsor Castle. Everything looked normal on the surface. The palace lights, the quiet corridors, the routine of a place she had spent 25 years carefully reshaping, restructuring, and slowly stripping of another woman's presence. She went to sleep, believing nothing had shifted. While in the Hall of Matriarchs, Diana's portrait now stood beside Queen Elizabeth, watching over the space where she had once been erased. The next morning would become the moment everything cracked open. Camilla reportedly arrived at Windsor expecting a normal day, a controlled environment she understood and had long been comfortable navigating. But the second she heard what had happened overnight, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Sources describe her going rigid with shock and anger. There was no calm response, no careful silence. She reportedly demanded the portrait be taken down immediately, insisting on an emergency meeting with William. She pushed for Charles to intervene on her behalf and called for a full explanation from every member of staff involved in the installation. Every one of those requests was refused, completely. No exceptions. For the first time in her public life inside the royal framework, Camilla reportedly found herself without influence over a decision made inside the very institution she had long been part of. The dynamic had shifted in a way she could not control. The same system she had navigated for decades had, in one night, moved without her consent. But insiders say the refusal of her demands was not even the most devastating part of that morning. The real turning point came when she turned to King Charles. For years, Charles had been the one constant in Camilla's life inside the monarchy, the person who defended her, protected her position, and fought battles on her behalf against public opinion, institutional resistance, and even tensions within his own family. He had spent decades ensuring she had a place beside him, and now, in this moment, she stood before him, reportedly humiliated and furious, expecting him to undo what had just been done and restore control. He looked at her, and he said nothing. That silence hit harder than any argument could have. King Charles reportedly did not intervene, did not pick up the phone, did not issue a single objection. He simply let the situation stand as it was. William's decision remained untouched, Anne's actions went unchallenged, and Diana's portrait stayed exactly where it had been placed in the Hall of Matriarchs. In that moment, insiders say Camilla realized something she had avoided confronting for years, that Charles was not stepping in to fix this. He was stepping back. And in that silence, she allegedly understood he had made a choice. The institution, his son, and a long-delayed acknowledgement of Diana's place in royal history had all taken priority. What makes this silence even heavier is what it represents beneath the surface. Reports have long suggested that Charles, in private, had previously urged William not to push Camilla aside after his death. A quiet request meant to preserve stability inside a deeply fragile family structure. But sources close to the situation also claim William's resentment toward Camilla has never fully disappeared. One insider stated that the pain tied to his mother's treatment remains unresolved for both William and Harry, even if it is expressed differently. William, they suggest, has simply learned to contain it in public. Charles has always known the depth of that tension. He has lived with it for years. And yet, when the decisive moment came, he chose silence. Not intervention, not protection. Silence. For some observers, that silence says more than any statement ever could. It suggests a king who understood that certain outcomes were no longer preventable, that the emotional weight surrounding Diana's legacy had reached a point where control was no longer possible. And just when Camilla may have thought the situation had already peaked, Princess Anne reportedly entered the room. She came directly, without hesitation. Standing face to face with Camilla, she's said to have delivered a blunt, cutting line. "It is what Diana deserved." 5 words that landed heavily, especially coming from the one senior royal who had never shown softness toward Camilla, never been intimidated by her presence, and never once altered her stance for the sake of peace. What followed was not just a difficult morning. It marked the start of a deeper, permanent shift inside the royal structure itself. Camilla's position, once considered secure, reportedly began changing in subtle but unmistakable ways. She was quietly eased out of upcoming public engagements, with adjustments made behind the scenes rather than through public announcements. At the same time, royal patronages once closely tied to Princess Diana were being reactivated and brought back into focus under Catherine's growing responsibilities. Charities Diana had passionately supported during her lifetime were suddenly reappearing in William's official schedule, as if the institution itself was deliberately realigning its priorities. Even royal communications began reflecting the change. In just 2 weeks after the restoration, Diana's name was mentioned more frequently than it had been in the previous 2 years combined. According to insiders, this wasn't random. It was seen as a clear institutional signal that something fundamental had shifted and that it was not being reversed. Observers have described it as a new royal order quietly taking shape, one that placed renewed emphasis on Diana's legacy and influence within modern royal representation. Behind all of this, William's long-standing resentment toward Camilla has reportedly never fully disappeared. One insider stated that the pain connected to his mother's treatment has remained present for both William and Harry, even if they process it differently. Harry, in his 2023 memoir, expressed it openly. He confirmed that both he and William once pleaded with their father not to marry Camilla, describing intense emotional moments where they tried to stop it from happening. Harry chose to speak about it publicly. William chose restraint. But that restraint, according to sources, was never absence. It was calculation. He waited, observed, and positioned himself within the institution until he had the ability to influence outcomes from within. And when he finally acted, it was precise and controlled. Meanwhile, reports suggest King Charles has privately asked William not to move against Camilla after his passing. A quiet request, made with full awareness of the tensions involved, and full awareness of how deeply those tensions still run. He knows that the moment William eventually takes the throne, every layer of Camilla's public and private royal life will be examined, reviewed, and potentially reshaped by a man who has never forgotten what he believes was done to his mother. Nothing will be untouched, not her role, not her influence, not her place within the institution. Meanwhile, Diana's patronages are already being revived. The charities she once supported with genuine personal passion and hands-on commitment are being lifted back into prominence under Catherine's increasing royal responsibilities and William's official schedule. It feels like pieces of Diana's legacy are being carefully reassembled and brought back into the center of royal life. Inside official palace communications, Diana's name is now appearing with a frequency and respect not seen since before her death. According to insiders, this shift is deliberate, a visible restoration of her presence within the monarchy's modern identity. And now, in the Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor, Diana's portrait finally hangs on the wall beside Queen Elizabeth. Two defining women of the modern monarchy, placed side by side in the space that represents its emotional and historical heart. A placement that insiders describe as long overdue and deeply symbolic. William was only 15 when he walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London. That moment, according to those close to him, became something he never moved past. A silent promise made in grief, carried forward through years of patience, calculation, and restraint. He waited. He learned the system. He built the institutional and legal structure carefully enough that, when the time came, it could not be easily challenged or undone. He brought Princess Anne into the process, relying on her authority and position to ensure the decision would stand. And then, in a quiet evening that changed everything, while Camilla slept across London, unaware of what had already been finalized, Diana was brought back into the room she was always meant to be part of. Her portrait is now on that wall. And according to insiders, it is not going anywhere anytime soon. Diana's legacy, once hidden and contested, is now being openly restored in ways that continue to reshape the royal narrative. And many believe this is only the beginning of a much larger shift still unfolding. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the royal developments, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happens next inside the royal family? And stay tuned because a sequel is coming soon with even more revelations, twists, and unfolding royal intrigue you won't want to miss.